What is up, everyone, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware about for the last week. As per usual, we have a lot of shenanigans today. We did find a piece of good news that we're really excited to talk about, followed by two pieces of interesting ransomware news. And later on, we're going to have Roddy Bergeron. We're going to talk about last week's security boot camp, which went off without a hitch. So with that, let's dive right into the news. All right, hold on though. I screwed up again. I forgot. Okay. Don't forget to sign up for Beyond. All right, early bird pricing is over, but it's still a great deal. Pax8beyond.com. More information on that new security track will be coming out soon.
Yeah,
I did. Sure, I did the needful. Sure. All right.
Yeah, you did the needful, as we used to be told. So 100%. It's great to have you back, Dom. I felt really lonely. I had a little hand puppet. I was talking to a volleyball. So yeah, it's good to see you again, man.
Good to be back. We had to take last week off as a whole thing.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And that was because of what we're going to talk about today, right? We're here to talk about the boot camp and, what it means to the MSPs that attended. So let's go ahead and kick off this first article. We're going to jump into the little bit of good news, right? So when you go online to buy information from info stealers, a lot of those wind up in this marketplace. And in fact, if you saw, Eric Taylor made a post about the decrease in price of records and assets and another one of those nefarious sites. Now, this one happened to be one that actually ran on the regular web, which I didn't dig in very much, but I have to imagine aided in some of this efforts across these countries, right?
Perhaps.
In some of that regard, because you don't have near as hidden of infrastructure as you might if it was something like Tor and on the dark web side of things, .onion sites, or as Roddy's going to talk about later, .bunyan. Sites, a very different connotation. Yes. But anyways, we look at this one, and this was actually a takedown by 17 different countries collaborating, right? 200 searches, 120 people arrested. Like, this is massive. I mean, we're not talking about what we hear sometimes in the news of a seizure of asset. Like, we took their asset. They're never going to be able to spring up. Well, hopefully they're following CIS and they have backups, right? These criminals are pretty good at what they do. So I imagine this is actually much more destructive, isn't it, Dom, in this regard?
This was a massive operation. It involved a lot of human-based I almost said kinetic. It was not kinetic, but it was a lot of human-based action coordinated around the globe from a global command center. So the scale of Operation Cookie Monster should not be understated. This was a massive effort, like you said, from 17 countries, which is also a huge amount of international cooperation.
Indeed, nom, Dom. So, to the point. It's terrible. Okay, too bad.
No.
But this was, let's just put it in perspective, right? Like, they had 80 million sets of credentials, digital fingerprints up for sale, like really seriously a pretty well operating one.
Is when you bought a set of credentials from these guys, they also gave you a custom browser that would imitate the user's browser down to the location and the browser fingerprint and everything, so that it would slip past most detection mechanisms. It's wild.
And it's a lot like demonstrating the token stuff, right? That we were talking about, even with the emulation where they have tokens, that's how you would actually use them. And so it's really automating the fraud and automating that primary initial access brokerage, right? You would put this in somewhat of a mixed category. In fact, you know what, Dom? I think we should start dark web Gartner, right? And really put these cyber criminals in the right what they do for enabling the market, right? This is kind of a mixed
these guys would be up in the upper right. Yeah. They did a good job being bad.
They did do a good job with respect to their own internal security, perhaps not as well. But I like pointing these out. We don't have to dwell too much on it, but it's always nice to see this, international cooperation, which we've always complained about in the cybersecurity community, right? It's never been something that's been well received and well done in a large scale, I think. And so it's really nice to have Operation Cookie Monster. My favorite comment you made on my post about this was like, who makes these things up? Like, these titles. I digress. So unfortunately, then let's pop over to a little bit worse news. We are seeing a new variant of ransomware, and really it's not as much about the variant of ransomware or its speed or things that we're talking about here in the Rorschach ransomware, because their top headline is it's the fastest. Mine actually would be, and yours, Dom, may be a little bit different. What would you think the headline is to this conversation?
You're pulling my chain on this one. XDR exploit used to deploy ransomware would be my headline personally. don't know about you.
Yeah, that's exactly the one in my heart. So, you think about this. This is one of the first times that I've seen. Now, I'm not necessarily an authoritative subject matter on that, but I stay pretty close to the pulse. But this is the first one I've seen that actually is leveraging your own defense tools. Yet again, right? Cobalt Strike started out as a defense tool, right? And so
Right.
you're leveraging
Right.
your tools where they're saying, hey, I'll compromise a vulnerability in an XDR deployment and be able to inject at the highest level of security. I'm an admin. I'm a super admin. I'm actually at the kernel level wherever I can be from a lot of these things, right? And so I being the XDR agent. So if I can compromise that, I have the access to drop in these winutils.dll, have a config file and an INI, jump them out in Notepad and use that to abuse it, and then do my encryption, right? So all of
I am
that coming
impressed that it's
from
fast, right? I think that
yes,
shows the increasing maturity of the people who write these, because
sure,
fast functional encryption can be tricky to pull off. So the fact that they've made it faster, I believe the article says it beat out Lockbit, if I'm not mistaken, for
yeah.
the fastest ransomware. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to encrypt things quickly and effectively.
Yep, yep. And they're probably leveraging a lot of the built-in, AES offload chips and things that are part of that modern encryption set that can happen, right? So I haven't
Well, they're
dug into this
actually
very
encrypting
much,
file
but
parts, which was an interesting piece of this. When they took it apart, they found it was encrypting headers on part of the core data, and you still end up with an
just
unusable
enough to be
file, right? Because it's
destructive,
incomplete.
but
Right.
right, right, right,
So it's
right.
really
So
interesting.
so the efficacy of the encryption still is part of that play, right? They're having to get just
Right.
enough, but also be fast and get through it. So, what's funny
Right.
is I would love to see vendors have that level of DAST and SAST or dynamic applications security testing and static application
Right.
security testing of their applications, of what these people do, of their efficacy versus speed, and kind of that balance for that wonderful encrypting UX, if you will.
Right. Right.
But yeah, good call out here. But the point is, this is another one of those situations. Oh, the auditors are in the room. I need to watch out. But this is another one of those situations where staying on top of the TTP, staying on top of the threats, a lot of that is why someone does use an MDR, right? Or does use some of these things. And it's just not great when you see that same thing be what's abused to deliver that, right? Is that XDR of that product. So keep an eye out. Make sure you stay up to date with your patching as well on these type of things, because I imagine this is patched. Do you know if this is actually officially patched yet, Dom?
I did not see yay or nay in the article, so I'm not sure. But I mean, it's in the article, so we can say it's from Checkpoint. Checkpoint is usually very responsive to these sorts of matters. So
They are.
just check if you're
I'll
using
give you that.
Checkpoint's XDR product. I
Yeah.
would imagine there's a patch.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't mean to not have that answer for you. I'll apologize. Okay, let's jump on to the last article. So, Dom, do you want to introduce this and kind of talk about the impact of this particular one?
Yeah, this one caught my eye. I got it in my daily InfraGard briefing. And this is an interesting one. So what I've read about, this is the UK's Criminal Records Office, which from what I read about it is probably equivalent to our FBI and CIC system, in that it maintains all the criminal records down to like so-and-so's custody arrangements if needed, and protection orders, and obviously criminal history and things like that. And in my mind, a compromise of that here in the U.S. would be a bad day. So if that's equivalent, this is a big one, right? This might be significant. But the interesting one is the ACRO, they call it, pulled their website down back in January for critical maintenance, right? And then it has just now come out that this was some level of cyber incident. There's not a ton of details yet. But man, Matt, could you imagine NCIC getting compromised? Like, that would be huge.
Yeah, it's bad. What's interesting about this, and I'm seeing a growing trend, and I will say I don't have any direct proof that I could ever share outside of an NDA, but I will say that several of the major incidents that I've had friends or known about have actually had to hold back their answers for quite a long time because of government involvement. And you might ask, well, why is the government specifically being different about these? And the answer would be, if you were just speculating, would be that there are a lot of things that might be TTPs, or techniques, tactics, and practices. I think it's techniques, tactics, practices. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are TTPs that might point to a certain government-based or government-attributed threat actor groups. And typically when you see that happen, you almost see a correlation of a much later assertion of what's going on. And a lot of the reason for that is OPSEC, right? A lot of the reason for that is just saying, we don't want to say what we know about them that keeps identifying this. But, allegedly, I've seen a couple of occasions of people, major companies, being involved in incidents where they've had to delay reporting, and the media really beats them up about it, as I do. And I think there's this interesting part where my gut says somebody compromising something like ACRO is probably going to be nation state affiliated, right? Is at least my hope and prayer and gut, right? Thoughts on that? Again,
well, Nick, the other half of that argument of government involvement is you can't come out and say we're not telling you anything because the FBI or whatever the equivalent is in UK asked us not. You can't come out and say that, right? Like that's not a thing.
With no such agency.
If you're involved, yes, with an intelligence or law enforcement agency. So it does suck. And even after the fact, and this is where I do think things can be fixed, is said agency can support that company and say, hey, we were holding our breath because of FBI or whatever investigations. Now we're able to come out with it because the FBI has achieved their results. And you don't have to share their results. Their results are probably classified, but just the overall knowledge of like, we knew, but we needed to hold back for a moment to let agencies do their thing, right? That would be massive if we got that.
They have not closed that loop in any of my evidence. The only one I'd point to that could be spoken to publicly in this that's not part of that initial statement would be Cyclops Blink with WatchGuard, right? WatchGuard had the ability afterwards to say, hey, we were actually working with Interpol and international agencies tracking a known threat actor. But what about when they don't want to expose those TTPs, right? And I know of a couple of others that's the case. So give it with a grain of salt on this one. I think we may be seeing the kind of awkward birthings of a lot of government's ability to start ingesting this data. I mean, we only just now,
especially with nation state
critical infrastructure. Yes,
right. Yeah. Like if a nation state actor is involved, you can count on being told to shut up, right? Because certain things need to happen by certain agencies. Yes, it will be a very quick confidential court order for you to shut up. And there's really important reasons for that when we're talking about nation state actors, because of this unknown about cyber warfare and cyber attacks between two countries. It's such, even nowadays, I think it's such a gray area, right? We haven't defined what's an act of war and what's this and what's that, what's just normal intelligence gathering, right? So again, take it with a grain of salt, and especially if it's a big high profile breach, maybe affecting a lot of individuals' data. That could be the case.
As this was
delayed notification,
right? It says identification in this particular information. And any criminal conviction data was impacted. Not, I mean,
if you have a cop friend, right, just ask them what they can see about you if they query you in NCIC, right? It's a lot,
right?
It's your whole life's in there, particularly.
And we don't know the level of exposure on this, right? But listen, that's why it takes a community. That's why it takes a village, right? And I think we ought to listen to the brilliant Robin Harris about this very subject. And
let's talk a little bit about being a part of professional communities and how that helps us level up, how that helps us. Now, there are security communities out there, and when you become part of these communities, you get to benefit from all of this knowledge, lessons learned, and some of those lessons were learned painfully. Like, you don't want to learn certain lessons on your own. You'd rather learn them from someone else who's gone through the pain, solved the problem, and everything like that. So there are some security boot camps. There's one coming up. You want to really think about, how can I participate in this event and walk away a smarter person? How can I walk away knowing things that are going to help me, level up my business, level up my professional skills, take advantage of these relationships, because when people in the industry come together and they share knowledge, suddenly we're not competitors or whatever. We're actually tapping into creating alliances and allies. And you will see a lot of businesses come together like that. They lay down their competitive thinking and they come together and they work together to accomplish certain goals. Because when you talk about an industry is not just one business. An industry is many businesses that have some stake in the game. And when industries work together, when people across the various industries come together and they work together on these problems, you will get better solutions. So boot camps, security boot camps, compliance boot camps, technology boot camps. Build your community of peers and you will see that your game will go up. Yeah.
Man.
All right, Matt.
Roddy
what was that?
Bergeron.
Just love picture.
Wow, it's feels good to be here, guys.
It's awesome to have you here, man. Listen, like, you know, you just for everybody's edification, Roddy is one of the newest CISSPs that I know. Has recently finished that courseware, and also
CISSP
attended our.
I was gonna say, and CCSP, right? You just got
and
knocked that out.
CCSP.
There you go.
Yeah, and you know what? We might dig into that in a minute about your thoughts versus the two tests. I have some thoughts on how different they are about certain things. So maybe we'll get into it.
Definitely.
But first off, you know, for everybody that's listening, watching, or here, tell everybody who you are and kind of what you do, and introduce yourself there, Roddy.
You want the long story or the short story?
You know, go from from cellular level, but you know, somewhere after that.
I'm Roddy Bergeron. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Enterprise Data Concepts here in South Louisiana. We're a managed service provider, like most of the people out there. You know, we'd like to consider ourselves a security focused MSP. You know, started my first job doing auditing of banks and hospitals and all kind of fun stuff. Did some privatizations with the state of Louisiana. We did some transitions with Department of Health and Hospitals, and said, you know what, I kind of want to get back into the IT game, you know. So I found an MSP that would accept me as I am, you know. And Matt and Dom don't laugh when I say that because you know how it
too late.
be.
Sorry.
and you know, it's been a blast ever since. You know, I came in as director of operations. Rolled out a whole managed service plan package, you know, started making sure our clients were on board with all of it. And then a few years ago, I was like, you know, there's this thing called cybersecurity, and I really want to understand it a little bit more. So I really started digging into that. You know, what's the CIS controls? I don't know, Roddy. You should maybe look into that, and really started digging into it a few years ago. And it's kind of where my journey ends, or kind of started, I should say, instead of ends. It's we here today, you know.
For everybody in the audience, you know, Roddy and I, for about those 2.5, 3 years, were on the same call together. It started as a bit of a therapy group during COVID, right? We all got on the same call every week for an hour with Ken and a bunch of other people. And we talked through things like PPP and loans and how we're going to deal with this. And then the security rise. We're seeing ransomware get really big. We're seeing business email compromise get big. We're watching our clients suffer and lose, right? And so, you know, that therapy group that we started together, you know, started to become much more of a kindred understanding of the growth and security that was necessary. So that's at least the staging for everybody of why Roddy's here. Because what we're going to do today is we're going to look at our security boot camp that we put on as a schedule level. And we're just going to kind of walk through and talk about some security concepts, what people should learn, what they have learned. And you ought to know something about learning. Why don't you tell everybody what your most recent unopposed running was for there, Roddy?
Well, knock on wood, all right? We're still, you know, there's still a race to be run, but I'm running for a school board here in Lafayette Parish. You know, I've had a lot of volunteer time and a lot of work in school systems, and an opportunity came up, and it's one of those things where it's like, if I don't do it, who's gonna? And we have a bunch of good ideas that we'd like to see. I always say I'm a student first. I'm always learning, but maybe it's time to say, I need to step up a little bit. So that's what we're doing. We have a few months till election, so we'll see how it goes.
Well, I love watching your teaching style and learning style, so I'd love for us to be maybe a little critical, but also let's talk about what we should learn and how we can all grow, both sides of the fence, through the lens of this. So, Dom, if you want to kind of kick us off, you were the schedule owner of this. Why don't you kind of
I don't know if
guide this conversation?
Owner, but I talked to the schedule team the most. So we're going to kind of run down Security Bootcamp, and there's a couple things significant about that before we dive in. Is Bootcamp historically in Pax8 has always been here in Denver, right? And it was because back then, like, the number of people we would have to fly to wherever would just be ridiculous, right? Well, now COVID has happened, and pandemic and remote hiring, and we have to fly everyone into Denver. So we decided, hey, let's try it somewhere new. So we had Bootcamp in Kansas City. You saw some of the photos there. We definitely encourage you to check out Pax8 Bootcamps, because they're just 2 days of nerding out and networking. That's what I'm going to start calling it. I just came up with that. But let's dive in. The agenda starts at breakfast. I think we're going to skip over that because it was at a hotel.
Yeah, nobody needs to hear that. Probably. But the bacon was fantastic.
Okay.
The bacon was fantastic.
It's really good.
Yeah, I don't know where they got it from, but I need that connect. I need that bacon connect.
Yeah, me too. It was crispy. In Australia, they have very floppy bacon. It's very, very, very different. So this is the perfect amount of crisp, if you will.
There's a joke there. I'm not going there. But let's kind of dive through it. The first thing we tried to do was lay out the land. And the reason that's important is because everyone needs to understand why they're there, right? We can't just dive into, let's open up Microsoft and do a bunch of nerdy stuff. We have to lay out the land. So you're going to critique my session, which will be fun. But we really tried to dive into, here's the threat landscape we're seeing and where security stands today. And that's where we broke out the scary numbers. And for me, that's my favorite session to do, because I get to see some faces when we say 22% of accounts have MFA. But what were your thoughts kind of as we kicked things off?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you go to these conferences or these boot camps, right? And when they say it's a cybersecurity boot camp, it's like, all right, how wide are we going to go, right? That's the big thing, because it's like when we think about cybersecurity a lot, we think about just I go back to my CISSP training, right? And I think about the CIA triangle, and we always think about confidentiality, but we never think about the other pieces. So we're gonna talk about today, right? So you did good. I love whenever we get in there and you throw a scary number out there, right? 20%, 30% only have MFA, right? And you go. Right. I know I'm doing that across all of our clients. Like, where's what am I missing? That's my first thing. Is like, we have to figure out what we're missing, right? Because we may think that we have MFA, but is it, push resistant MFA? So that gets my brain juices flowing in the morning, which is not always a good thing. But it's one of those things that we have to do. So it's good setting the stage there, Dom, and really gearing up for what this day is going to look like, right? And really catching people's attention by saying, hey, here's what's happening out there, and here's where we need to focus. I think that's a good part of it, right? And that and the Red Bulls help a lot.
The Red Bulls help. That big old cooler full of Red Bulls was like really dope. Like whoever planned that out was a win. Yeah. Red Bull next to water, it's perfect.
Wait, you didn't bring me one? You didn't bring me one at all?
No, fresh out.
The cooler?
We unfortunately emptied the pockets. Yeah. Yeah, even the cooler.
Very many Red Bulls.
Yeah.
So the thing that I noticed out of this was, and this is the third time we've done it, right? We've had 2 real boot camps, and we had 1 throwdown that was the beginning of this. The one thing that I noticed is when you went through that State of the Union, Dom, there's more mature. Interestingly enough, there's this weird mix out of this one where the people that were there, which by the way, we had like a almost 70% attendance rate. Like, that's huge for people flying in somewhere, right? Like, that's massive. So thank you to everybody that was at this. I really appreciate you being able to make it and having such a high, I want to come learn and be a part of this, right? And that's why we care so much about it. But the maturity's rising. I think when you were giving that State of the Union, people were like, yeah, okay, we agree with that. We know where we're at. Even Roddy, to your point, saying, am I using phishing resistant? at least you're aware of MFA at this stage. A year and a half ago, I would say that we had a little bit lower maturity, wouldn't you, Dom? In my opinion.
So that was so. If we want to look at the numbers, that was actually 2021's number, and Microsoft went the OT direction in their reporting. So they didn't give us a new number, which I was supremely disappointed about. But yeah, I do think we have to have gotten more mature. Otherwise, I think threat actors would have decimated the market by now, right? If we didn't improve,
it's fair.
Decimator, like that, we would be gone, right? Like,
yeah, or is it a sliding scale, right? Where we know now the landscape's getting bigger. So if you were doing the same thing from last year, now, well, maybe we are maturing, but we're still at the same place, right?
And that's actually, Roddy, you nailed it. Because in the exact inverse, I would say that when we ask people, have you implemented this? Have you done this? Have you done these things? Two things played out. Number one, way less people raised their hands. When I asked, are you following CIS controls? I think 6 people raised their hands out of 200-ish, right? 170-ish. So that part was actually a decrement in what they're actually doing, right? But in the other case, I think what might be part of that is they're actually just much more in tune to try to figure it out now. And there's more people in the audience going, I need to solve this, right? Like, so it's, what are your thoughts about that? Because I was surprised that less people. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you're getting a better understanding of it, you're less likely to raise your hand, right? Like if you would ask me 3 years ago, are you implementing CIS controls? I'd be like, yes. And then there's a lull where I was probably like, oh, once I learned more about it, I was probably like, no, I'm not implementing it the way I should be.
Yeah.
And then I learned a little bit more and I said, okay, well, I'm doing a pretty good job because I'm probably now at like IG2 or whatever. So I think you go through those stages of maturity yourself where you're like, yeah, I'm doing that. Well, no, I'm not doing it as good as DomKirby. And then you go back and you say, well, I don't have to be as good as DomKirby this time, but I'm still doing it. I'm still moving forward.
Does anybody know what that concept is called that you're talking about, Roddy? This is the test and educator question.
I don't know. I just feel like it's an evolution of your thought process.
Rob?
No.
It's referred to, and it's also actually now being somewhat reconsidered to be incorrect, but it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And the Dunning-Kruger curve, where the more you know about something, the more you realize how much there really was to know and that you actually don't, right? And I'm sort of super paraphrasing, but it's a mixture of comparing self-assessment and objective performance.
It's one of those things where it's like, I always say it's like it's enough to be dangerous and not enough to be
See, people like Roddy use real words, right?
Yeah. I try, Hey, that's what I do. I mean, that's what I do for a living. Like I go in front of attorneys and insurance owner or people who own small business, and I go, okay, let's do. I can't say Pam. I'm like, hey, let's work on some control.
What is Pam? We got an acronym. Governance. That's an acronym in this world. So, what is it? It's privileged access management.
Privileged access management. Yeah.
We have to toss.
I thought that was wasn't that the stuff that you spray on the pans before you?
Either or.
Pam.
Either or.
Got it.
It causes cancer. I'm sure of it. We just haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
So I digress.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So
let's move on to. Yes, you might need to talk about your LinkedIn profile, bro. It's this many miles long. We need to talk about getting a short name in there. I swear to goodness. Not kidding. Rob's agreeing.
Yeah. You can adjust that. You know that, Roddy, right? Yeah.
We'll fix it. I'll help you. Anyways, I digress. So the next segment really was me getting on stage. Is that correct, Dom? In our agenda,
we had a vendor session, and I think it's important to touch on the importance of vendor sessions. So Microsoft, I think I'm a Microsoft guy, so some of you watching are going to disagree with me, but Microsoft covers a huge amount of this landscape, particularly if you look at CIS.
I do,
but it doesn't do everything. Right. Or there might be a better way to do some things in terms of like multi-tenant management, since we're all MSPs here.
Especially qualitatively, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So our first vendor was Nord, and they really came in with their password product a little bit, but the one that really interests me and why I wanted them there was Nord Layer and their SASE product and their ability to encapsulate traffic and control network traffic on devices is a massive one. I don't think we have to spend too much time on that session. I did want to call out, that's why we do vendor sessions. And like the full transparent method is obviously helps pay for the boot camp. I think everyone knows that. Right?
Yeah.
But we're very intentional about the vendors we bring in to make sure that they align with what we're trying to teach you, right? And that they add to it and they don't just, show up and pass out business cards. Hey,
And
I'm very
I'll
curious
speak
your
to this,
thoughts on
Roddy.
that. Go ahead.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
let Roddy
Oh.
first intro on this, and then I got some stuff to add on it for sure.
Yeah, no, that's those. Nord was good. I go back to our, we were talking about COVID earlier and all the things that changed from it. With the spike in ransomware, but we also saw the spike in remote work, and we struggled of like how we're going to secure that, right? What are we going to do? Because everybody used to be in the office, everybody, we knew what to protect and we knew where their assets were. But then now that's changed. Like, we didn't know. So that hearing from a vendor about how you protect that, especially whenever you may be trying to get into the security game and you're not really thinking about that, right? You're not thinking, we go back to the old castle approach, where it's like, protect it, put everything inside the walls and protect it, but the castle model's broken, so we have to rethink that.
Cannons
a lot of people
changed
don't think about
Completely
that.
broken.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Like cannons changed castles. Let's just be honest. It was not advantageous to be where the balls were hitting at that stage. It was not
Right.
good. So ultimately, I think to your point, what I saw was Nord came up and showed, a little bit of talked about how their product protected, talked about those things. What I'd love to see in the future, and this is one of the things we talked about with these vendors, and back to your point of we have to do it, but can we make it more fun, is have vendors lean more into using the products as a way of taking that time up, right? Like, for example, I told him, and Gerald and I talked about this afterwards from Nord, and he's actually building something up in their lab right now, I believe. So, but you have some picture of Roddy Bergeron looking silly hidden on a web page, and it's accessible to the world. You go, oh, gosh, Roddy didn't want that picture up there. Let's put something in front of it. We'll put an access control.
Make me a little nervous. Make me a little nervous on the picture, man. I don't know what picture they have of me now.
Well, listen, this phone goes with me at 2 a.m. too, bro. So, yeah. But the point is, if we had this up and we wanted to protect it, they could then show applying Nord layer to it and saying you can't access this unless you're behind Nord layer, right? That kind of demonstrative teaching. And I think next time they do it, there's going to be some really cool stuff that comes out of that. And I think that was missing a little bit.
Yeah, I think too, like as someone who's been in the MSP game for some years now, you smell a sales pitch from a mile away too, right? Like it's common, and so like we talked about, we've talked about it before, even internally. Educate first is the best way to lower some defenses with people, where they're understanding it and they don't see the 100%. Sales. They don't see the sales pitch that you're actually doing, right? It sounds kind of tricky, or you trying to trick, but really, like, you educate them about what's out there, what's going on. What do I do? Then you identify those pain points, hammer it home, and then the last thing you want to do is sell. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive to what sales is traditionally, but I think the market's changing, right? I mean, I get 40, 50 emails a day.
Send it all the people in my LinkedIn DMs.
Yeah. I mean, we joke about it. I mean, you're in some of those chats, man. We joke about, the LinkedIn requests and things that we get. That's like, hey, Roddy, saw you here. Have you ever tried blah, blah, blah? And it's like,
Are you having any giant concerns about this next? But I want to be in the sake of time to get through some of this agenda. I want to continue moving forward. But before that, I think you hit on the nail on the head on, teach them first, educate first. Here's a great example. Anybody ever watched Project Farm on YouTube? Brother, I've bought more products because of that review and honest breakdown of the stuff that he does. Like, he's like, you want to find out? Says it prevents rust. We're going to test that. And like, he genuinely does. And then you buy the right product at the right price. Like, I bought my jack stands. I brought my ratchet, like all of it from Project Farm. But the point is, I'm going to go to YouTube first. I'm going to go get education first. I'm going to go get that honest kind of feedback first. But the next piece, I think, was me jumping up and demonstrating a few of the modern cloud
behind the curtain and how some of these attacks work, right? Because my perspective is I'm not a security analyst, right? Like, I'm not doing that kind of research, and I'm not always seeing that. So to see someone kind of pull that curtain back a little bit and show me what's going on when these attackers get in, besides just the report I get from our SOC, really kind of helps me, right? It helps me understand a little bit more of what's going on. What I'd like to see more of it. I mean, we've seen some things with vendors going through those attack processes, and we've done some pre-conference events where you actually walk through performing some of these attacks, and it really helps you kind of grasp a little bit of what you're reading and seeing whenever you're seeing some of these reports come through. So it's good stuff, Matt. Like, I love seeing it. I love seeing both sides of the coin, from the attacker side and the defense side. It's really for me, right? Because I'm in there. My job most of the time is translating geek into tech. So it helps me It's really, I'm going to add it to my LinkedIn bio, like barbecue enthusiast, yada, 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 cybersecurity translator or something, because that's really,
sure.
I mean, how long can I get my LinkedIn time? But that's part of it. So if I can understand the nuts and the bolts, right, I can translate it, because the thing runs true of, if you can't explain it to someone like they're 5 years old, you really don't grasp it. So that helps me grasp it a little bit,
And because of some feedback last time we did this, somebody said, Matt, you just focused on the attack. You just showed us the attack. You didn't show us anything about the protection. This time I changed it a little bit. Yeah, I showed that defense side. Here's where you check the box. Here's what it does when you check the box, right? And here's how you can protect yourself. So I think that was the change there. I don't know how effectively I pulled that off, but I think I did a better job of trying to actually stop and pause and talk about that.
And I think it's different than someone talking about the new features, the security features too. Like, it kind of changes the flow of the event a little bit. Like, it breaks it up, right? And add something fun for us who are, because I know, talking with people in the crowd, there were some security evangelists, and I don't like to use the word nerd too much, but there were some security nerds there, and they like to see that kind of stuff. So that's what captures them, and that's what keeps their attention. So it's good stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Very cool. Dom, what's next on our agenda that we need to go through here?
All right. Well, then we took a break, but I don't think there's any need to review that. There was excellent Red Bulls.
It was a good break.
We had. Sorry,
excellent.
Ben, back to the Red Bulls. Yeah.
Back to the Red Bulls. And then we had WatchGuard, right, which is another interesting layer of that. And I was excited to bring them because everyone knows WatchGuard for the firebox, right? The red firewall. But WatchGuard brought a different perspective, because we told them, like, we're literally saying that the castle is pretty useless, so you got to come with something else, and they did. And I'm actually a fan of that AuthPoint product. I think it has some huge potential when applied properly. That and some of the MDR stuff that they were showing off in their XDR platform, combined with, when you do have the network, I think you did a really good job tying all that together, but really with the focus on AuthPoint, with all these identity attacks you were doing just before a session. So I think Danny got teed up well by you, and I think he had a pretty good session as a fan.
Yeah. Some of the stuff they do around, like, where is this device? What applications requesting it? Things like that give you more context around it. The other thing that I'll say is I just spent the last week with WatchGuard. I've been on their pack for, I think, 8 years or so, from when I was still an MSP, and they still honor me enough to let me talk, even though I do what I do now. But, and I say, boy, do I talk. But no, I went, and they have just hired a young lady that was responsible for most of the early stages of Microsoft Identity. And she just came on, and she's revamping some of their AuthPoint to be OAuth and OIDC and FIDO2 compliant capabilities, things like that come right into what we're talking about. And so, it's that, back to your beginning point of, we tried to cater to vendors that we thought understood and met that kind of identity-centric model, and they're one of those that took that very heavily. You can make the VPN very easily MFA, where travelers insurance asked by just going click button, yep, that's Matt, and absorb that direct from Azure AD, right? And so that's pretty huge. But again, like to see it be more demonstrative and less subjective, right? And I think that's part of being a boot camp, is it's meant to be wrench in hand.
Show me, don't just tell me. Right, like that's a big part of learning, right? Like, when we offboarding, or whenever we're moving tasks or training for a task, the first thing's like, watch me, and then next part is you do while I watch, and then that whole process. So I find that people are more likely to retain it or leave a mark on them if they see how it's done. They're not just told how it's done.
Agreed.
That makes sense.
Agreed. That's my feedback. Yeah, 100%. I love it. Yeah, 100%. So after that, we stepped into a session about what, Dom?
Azure Identity. So really good tee off from WatchGuard Identity, right? We dove right into the nuts and bolts of Azure Identity, which is such a broad topic nowadays. So Jake presented that. He did a fantastic job. And he really talked about, in pro services, we do a lot of identity. It's probably the core of what we do in that business premium space. So he covered, conditional access and all the basics, and went through some templatization and where identity is going. And in my opinion, really showed the power of Microsoft Identity. But I'm really curious your two thoughts, since we've really just had a chance to sync up about it. So yeah.
Why don't you go first there, Roddy?
I mean, I can tell you right now, we're tying everything back to Azure right now, like any kind of identity. I mean, and you look out there, almost every single third-party service now has some kind of Azure identity tie-in. So really, we're starting to dig a lot more into what we can accomplish with it and how we can better align with CIS controls, right? Like single sign-on as being part of that.
5.6.
I want to say, I knew I was like, I'm never going to remember the
Can't
CIS
do the control
controls
thing
numbers,
like you, man.
but I know Matt's gonna know because that's Matt's superpower is to
5.6
shoot
and some
off a
extensibility into 6.7 actually specifically, but yeah, 5.6 is the first part of that.
But it's important, right? Especially from a centralized logging perspective of who touched what, where, and when, and when that's distributed across different platforms, really makes it harder,
8.12,
especially for an
13.1.
MSP.
You count these as acronyms? Like
these are
nobody's
yes.
gonna know what 8.12 is.
Yes,
Yeah.
ding them, ding Matt for this as an
Ding him, I get dings for
but-
this. Like that'd be 4 dings.
Yeah, but it's true though, right? If you're looking at it from an incident response perspective, right, and you're an MSP, right, and you're trying to at least do some initial discovery, initial information gathering,
Sure.
you're gonna go dig across all the platforms that you have? No, like we're gonna tie that back to centralized logging and centralized identity. And I think that's what Azure. I think, like, I really never understood the power of Azure AD and Azure Identity until I really started looking at it from a logging and incident response perspective. And now I'm just like, I don't know what I'd do without it. Now I have one centralized point I can look at and pull data into and enrich my threat detection and threat response.
One of the things that comes to mind from this, and I actually think that your guy did an amazing job, Dom, as he always does, right? Like, he's just fantastic, Jake. But I think one of the pieces that, to your point, is when you walk someone through and show the granularity of these policies, the things that I can do, how I can deny you access or allow you access or cut off access, but you combine that with what you just said by bringing the proximity of the data and the sign-in information to where the control plane exists, right? Seeing, Roddy's signing in, he would meet this more stringent control. Let me go ahead and turn that on. By bringing that response plane to the control plane in proximity, very, very close to each other, you get really accurate tuning of those results. You can do it very easily. And as you start seeing that now extend into me signing into Calendly and me signing into my line of business application and me signing into QuickBooks or whatever it may be through those single sign-on platforms or 5.6, right? You see that ability to look in one place and see all of the contextual information you need. But more importantly, you see it then extended into Defender. You see it then extend into the data sets that can be consumed by a Blackpoint or somebody like that, right? And it's just extremely valuable in one place, all of that data. And I think they did a great job of highlighting and showing that in that hour and a half or whatever it was.
Yeah,
and operationally,
100%.
right? The ability to hit one button and kill it is massive, right? Maybe not across all the apps because we got a ways to go on session termination, but the ability to kill a sign-on in one step is massive.
Yeah, agreed.
Or until you have a tech who accidentally kills an account. Now it's across the board. So I mean, it's not that would happen. Right? It would never happen.
No, never. No tech ever makes a mistake.
Never happens.
Yeah.
But y'all have never gotten a call of an attorney getting locked out of their account at like 11 a.m. when they have like a briefing in 30 minutes. Never happens.
And I think that's where you start seeing that automation capability be able to be tied back to, and Jacob went over this, dynamic groups, things that are controlled by HR changing your title or letting go of an employee ties directly one-to-one from an automation flow potentially to disable that user and now have extensibility to 12 other things they would assign into. And I think that's the point of it is, you're right, where the humans come into play, the more mistakes we make, the more we can automate, the more we can tie into that source of truth, the better, right? So
that's where I was heading is when you start to automate, this makes a lot more sense. Your workflow, especially your automation workflow, becomes a lot less complex. And it simplifies. I mean, it simplifies the troubleshooting. It simplifies where the errors can happen in automation. So it's
also a juicy attack surface.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, right?
it kind of scares
because
me.
Of that. It's okay. I digress. Dom, what else we got next on the agenda?
I just realized we skipped lunch. I just want to call it. Lunch was great, and there's more Red Bull to be.
It was
had.
fantastic.
Significant.
There
amounts
was
of Red Bull
lots of it.
Laughter.
You're just being hurtful at this point. Like
true story. Yeah.
I had 4 meals while I was in Kansas City, and 3 of them were barbecue. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
I didn't
got
eat
the meat
any
sweats
chicken
by definition.
I ate beef and pork the whole time, and I realized I should have had at least one poultry meal this entire time. Would have been healthier.
That was a very good
Uh,
granular role-based access control to avoid
Yeah.
chicken. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, just pork is better, man. Oh, but I digress.
All right.
I'm gonna flip-flop the agenda to make sure we have time. I
Sure.
want to dive into the partner panel because that's probably my favorite thing we do at any of these events is the part. Because look,
Always.
we work hard to put together a lot of great content, but there's far more value in talking to partners, both in the networking time between sessions, after sessions, and happy hour, what have you, and the partner panel where we can get Roddy and others up there to just answer questions about their real world experiences and the craziness that they're seeing that does or doesn't relate to what we may have been teaching all day. So, Roddy, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the partner panel because it's a hugely impactful thing for everyone. But what were your thoughts on that? Did you have fun being on the partner panel? Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the partner panel was fantastic. I mean, I love all my panelists. I see Shell in the YouTube comments. Gotta love Shell, man. He's a wonderful individual.
What's up, Shell?
I wish I had more time to hang with him, but he's
And
he's
Craig.
an all right guy in my book. But the yeah, oh, I didn't see Craig. There's Craig. Yeah, so the yeah, no, the panel's great, right? One of the things I love to talk about is, we go back to like caveman days, right? We told stories, we told about our experiences, we made things relevant and said stories in a way that could relate with people. And I think that's the magic of these panels is like we're pulling from our own experiences. And what I try to impart on people too is like my story doesn't hold more weight than your story. It doesn't hold more weight than
Right.
the stories that Matt has or that Shell has or that Henry has on the panel. We all have different perspective and different stories, and everybody's story is valuable and everybody's insight is valuable. And just, I wish more people did that storytelling of their experiences because I think that's how we learn and kind of progress a little bit is that storytelling and those questions you ask. And we kind of give an answer, but talk about our experience with it, when we had someone asked about the whether or not they needed E&O and cyber liability insurance at the same time.
Yeah.
I was like,
That was a big one.
yeah, and it took me a second to process it. Of like, wait, did I miss something? I was like, no, I've had these conversations before with insurance carriers about that, and
Right.
Getting to hear too, it's a learning experience for me because I get to hear from other panelists as well up there who have different experiences than me, different they handle different industries, they get different perspectives,
Yeah.
we someone may ask a question and we may have two different answers for them, but it's just based on our experiences and our and everything that comes with it. It's good. And then, like you said, the stories that come afterwards, and then the networking and discussing with people. I mean, I can't tell you how many LinkedIn questions and everything else I got. And just tell people like I'm an open book. I'm on LinkedIn, ask me a couple questions. You want some feedback from me? I'm more than happy to do it. I go back to Matt's favorite thing of raising the tide. We have to, right? We have to as an industry. You have to care enough to want to help people out, and this is part of that, right? I learned from people bigger than me and greater than me, and people who were willing to mentor me and tell me when I was doing things wrong or telling me when I was doing things right. And you have to get to a point where it's time to give back, right? And this is the part of that panel is me giving back too. So you say thank you, Roddy, for being my thank you for giving me a stage to give back to, right? That's an important piece of it.
You know what? Robin talked about this, but the community aspect, I think panels do more for that than anything else, in the sense that if you can have smart people that have gone through this, are willing to share, that want to actually help somebody else stand up on stage and answer questions that people might be too afraid to ask, right? You think about the one person that asked, there's 9 more people in that audience that wanted to ask something about that, right? And they get to hear that in that forum and get y'all's opinion on it, and those kind of things is fantastic. And, you shout out to, like, you had different viewpoints on there. You had Sheldon that comes up there. He's a very compliance-driven, very, we call him Shellbot. I love him to death, but genuinely, right? But you have you have, his boss, Tim Choquette, who's much more on that business side, the business understanding conversation of it, right? And so you had several peers up there, all with a little bit different lens and viewpoint. And I think Henry Tim was up there with you. Who else was up there? Did I miss anybody? I think
we had Derek from Machine Logic.
Derek from Machine Logic was up there as well.
Yeah.
And he brings a very tactical security owner of the security team at that company for that MSP. And so you have a mix of voices. And what I've always loved about that, not as much that my voice isn't on there anymore. It's cool. I'm not even hurting the least bit. I certainly didn't have anything to say. No, I tease. But is that the rotation of that always seems to surface more people with that same heart, Roddy, right? With that same want to give, want to share, want to talk about my things. And what's interesting about our community is the MSP community is kind of unique in that matter, right? Where a lot of the people that are up there sharing are sharing to help the person that's listening, not to help themselves look amazing, right? And that's a unique thing about our world, I think.
Yeah, I'm not doing it for the paycheck, all right? So
what? We don't pay you enough? It was free beer and a place to sleep.
I mean,
lots of Red Bull.
We'll see. Well, yeah, lots of Red Bull. Lots of Red Bull. I mean,
we don't even pay Rob Red Bull.
But yeah, I mean,
all right,
you nailed it, right? Y'all, Pax8 has built a community that where other partners want to participate in and help build it up. So it's almost like the community is now at a spot where it's almost, it's not just company driven, right? So the value that it brings is this isn't just Pax8 trying to tell you what you should do. This is your peers. These are people who are all over the spectrum when it comes to maturity and technical know-how. And they're gonna tell you their life stories and their experiences, and that's very important. It shows the maturity of where the Pax8 community, I think, has come and gone, and is going. I should say, all stages.
That's what drew me here. It's a community. That's like the number one reason I joined Pax8. All right, we only got like 4.5 minutes left, so I'm gonna skip over a couple sessions because one of them I really wanted to make sure we got to was the day 2 first session after breakfast on Red Bull. We talked about cybersecurity policies, and we brought Rex Franken and Matt to help support that, and then we did something different. We brought our security solutions consultants out to talk about framework adoption as a whole, which was really new, and they crushed it.
Yeah.
For those of you that didn't know, that
nervous
was the first
baby
time,
birds.
They absolutely crushed it. So just know, Will and Isaiah, you guys did fantastic on that stage.
Yeah, they did.
But that session was by far one of my favorites because that operational piece, and I'm a nerd for I love the tech, don't get me wrong, but I really like the operational pieces, and some strange part of me loves fighting these battles about like, no, we have to do this, and being in that boardroom. What was your thought? Both of your thoughts on that session? That was a fantastic one in my mind.
I have to say, unfortunately, I had an early morning flight that morning, so I didn't get an opportunity to I had work stuff and everything else going on. So
yes. No,
you will be invoiced for some of those Red Bulls now, Roddy. I just want to put that out there.
all 20 of them that I drank, man, that's a little.
It's expensive.
I'm upside down. My Red Bull heavy portfolio has come back to bite me.
No, I'll speak towards it though, Dom. I think it's a great call out. They did do a fantastic job. You could tell that's that early stage, a first time on stage with 200 sets of eyeballs. Well, 199 sets of eyeballs looking at them. Right. And so sorry, because mine, never mind, everybody knows. But yeah, the point is, I think it actually did a really good job because it actually brings up and culminates something we and the SSC team have been working very hard on, which is why do we sell products just to sell products? Why do we not focus on the why much more? And back to Roddy's point, the why is CIS. It's a framework. It's things. Maybe NIST, CSF. I won't be completely exclusive. We happen to land on CIS. But the why is this. Now I'm going to do these things. And here's the actual tie into why and how to operationalize this. But also it's about how do I meet insurance goals? How do I do this with my customers? How do I have those conversations with my customers and show that I'm adding value, right, Roddy? And maybe we'll wrap this up with just a minute or two from you on that of how do you use something like those frameworks as a Roddy to make your clients feel like they've done and made the right decision for you as you continue to raise prices or ask for more?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where I'm an authority to my clients, but I'm not an authority in cybersecurity per se. So I need something to back what I'm saying up with, right? And I deal a lot with attorneys. Like legal's a big thing. You can't just go to an attorney and be like, you need this. What's the first thing they're gonna ask you? How do you know that? Right? They're gonna grill you, So having those frameworks helps me understand where I'm at, where I'm going, and what I need to do. And it's not just me making things up. It's not me going to a conference and seeing, new shiny tool and saying, I need that. I feel like I need to put this in place because I have a gap or I have a need, and not really knowing why I have that need. There's a difference between that gut feeling and saying, I know I have a gap, and actually understanding your risk management and your gaps. And that's where the frameworks come into play. And I think a lot of vendors, Pax8 included, are starting to see that and saying and selling their tools is not just another tool that you need, another thing that's going to protect you and get past the marketing piece. They're starting to sync up with the industry, with what MSPs want in those control frameworks. And it's a good thing, right? Like, we still need to market, right? And I understand companies need to market and sell. They need to make money to stay afloat.
Yep.
But the marketing piece needs to change a little bit from shiny new tool and let's go have a steak dinner and a handshake to here's where let's have a guy. Oh, look, I've fallen for the steak.
We can keep the steak dinners. I mean, they're okay.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying get rid of
secondary
them.
factor.
Like,
this is multi-factor sales here,
yes.
Dom. This is a secondary factor.
But that's the point of it is the industry matures, the marketing has to mature along with it, and I think that's where the controls kind of start to fit in.
Yeah.
100%.
That's a great note to end on, Roddy. And I'll give the second 10 seconds out on this, is that at Pax8, we're actually working on that, Roddy. You're kind of part and understand what we're working on, but we're trying to tie products back to the CIS controls. Where do they facilitate? Where do they actually partially meet, fully meet? And where, if I use this product, is that vendor going to invalidate a control? Like, let's say they don't offer SSO and I can't use 5.6. How do I surface that? And we're realizing we're trying to make this easier for you as partners of Pax8 through that effort and that work. And it makes up about 20 hours of my calendar every 2 weeks right now. So we're working hard on that in the background.
Good.
Dom, you want to close us out? Yeah. Thank you for being here, Roddy. I really appreciate you, and just thanks for all your efforts and help on that.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. I love talking. You know that. I'll talk your ear off. So I'm glad you'll have a time.
True story.
Thanks so much for coming, Roddy. This has been a fantastic show.
Appreciate it.
Happy Friday, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. Don't forget to click like, subscribe,
Happy
share,
Easter.
all those magical buttons down there that boost our buttons, or boost our, you threw me off, Matt, that boost our scores.
We need button boosting right now, post haste.
Indeed, happy Easter. And we'll see you next week on the game.